the Dade Award. And what it is, Thorin, because our fans have probably heard this a million times, but there seems to be a lot of weird misconceptions about what the Dade Award is, who can give the Dade Award out, if it's even awarded every year, where it came from in the first place.
I don't know where we should start on this. So here's the thing. Like, first of all, I actually did do, but sadly, I don't even remember it myself. I think it was like I can't remember if it was Thorin versus Reddit or Petty Greens. So I did a video on my channel once where a guy did some really insane Reddit comment about the Dade Award and that I broke down for like an hour. Something mental, right? Because he just did this whole thing where I actually think he did capture the sentiment, though, of why there's a controversy about this award, Monty. So basically, the award is just a fun analytical device we created like 10 years ago at this point in time, right? In fact, if people don't know, as I've just said, some of the insight didn't exist in season 3 when Dade failed at Worlds. It existed like a few months after that, hence why we then used Dade as the first person to win this award, right? Now, what people might not realize is this. We just did it because we created a very unusual set of circumstances that is fun to track. So as we always point out, the scenario of the Dade Award is it's someone who was hyped, but ideally by us as being one of the absolute best players in the world. And then they go to Worlds, the biggest tournament, and they don't just do badly. They really do badly. They underwhelm, they fail, they fuck up, right? It's not, this is what I'm going to get to key point here. It's not just a player who did really badly, or wow, this guy's famous and he did badly. That's quite a key distinction. But the reason why, Monty, there's a controversy around this award is because of 2 factors. One, we don't give it every year. So because we don't give it, it keeps making people think we don't do the Dade Award anymore and that someone has to win every year. So what they do is they insert the blank, right? And then secondly, just as I've just said, because it's a really great conceit, like it's a really fun one to track, everyone can't just admit and give us our fucking praise for coming up with a cool concept and name and go, hey, I know you guys award it, but here's who I'd give it to. So instead what they do is they go, well, you didn't invent the idea. Actually, we literally did invent that analytical device. No one in history, literally, I'm telling you guys, in esports and sports, there is no award like the Dade Award. It doesn't exist. You won't find it anywhere. You won't find a single thing in football for the best player who failed. You won't find a single thing in basketball, in MMA. So here's the thing. You're all welcome to do an unofficial version. You can see, here's what I think should win the Dade Award. But either one, if you want it to be like not our version, just don't call it the Dade Award. What's the big deal? Dade hasn't even played in fucking years. Call it whatever you want. What you must admit, though, is it is a straight fire conceit. Like, it is better than famous player who did badly, because it's such like specific like guidelines of what it should be that when you actually find it, it is. By the way, the whole point of why it isn't every year is like these are like unicorns. Think about how rare it is that an actually truly like great player in the world just utter shits the bed in the world. It's like, that's enormous. So I actually think I get why there's a controversy, because people are doing the thing about, yeah, but we can do it as well. It's like, not if you want it to be the Dade Award, then that's ours. You can call yours whatever you want. You can call your version of it, make your own, call it the Neo Dade Award if you want, but we do the Dade Award because we invented that concept, which, by the way, I think we should be allowed to take credit for things we did do that are cool. This is so relevant, Monty, that even when Dade hasn't played and probably was never seen by most Zoomers watching this episode, even they know about the Dade Award. The name is iconic. It's a pretty fucking cool concept.
Exactly. It's great. And if anything, we've actually given out a surprising number of Dade Awards, because you would think that the whole excellent player, top ranked coming into Worlds, possible season MVP, completely shitting the bed wouldn't happen. But it happens a surprisingly frequent amount of the time, yes. Which is, by the way, an indictment of Riot's formats, and it's an indictment of their patching system, because I think if there weren't these giant patches between Summer and Worlds, we wouldn't have as many Dade Award winners, because there's been a lot of times where the meta has just completely shifted, and a player who might have just been on fire in a certain meta during Summer is now all of a sudden just completely out of sorts when they reach the World Championship.
That's what you want to know something ridiculous as well, Monty. I'm just looking over the list of people we've given it to, and aside from Dade, it's just the LPL, bro. You know, every year an LPL favorite just bombs. It's just whoever's on that team did the worst bit. Part of that is that the LPL like #1 seed has like dropped out of groups a surprisingly large amount of times. Yeah, it's insane. But I just noticed the list just is LPL players basically, bro. It's just the LPL.
Sometimes it's Koreans in the LPL.
Which, by the way, bizarrely, Monty, I'm told all we do is glaze the LPL. Oh, it's weird. We only invented an award that they win every year where they're mocked and derided for all of esports history. But, you know, I guess I didn't say Faker's double plus extra XXXL good this year, so I must just hate him or something. I don't know. Who knows how it works?
Who knows what the roles are? So yeah, all of this is to say that we could start with Dade, and the reason why they're called the Dade Awards. So we have to travel back. Come with me, friends. Traveling back in time to the year 2013 and the Season 3 World Championship. This is Faker's first Worlds. It's the first Worlds that Faker won. Faker was in his second split as a player, so he hadn't even played an entire year yet. And really the reason why Dade, who was a renowned player by this point in time, and he was on a team called MVP Ozone, which became Samsung White, which became Samsung Ozone, which then became Samsung White. So it's the same like core of players. And Dade would later go on to win, in 2014, he would go on to win a split on Samsung Blue. He himself would reach the World Semifinals in 2014 and have a significantly better performance before losing to Samsung White, which then won Worlds in 2014. But why 2013, you may be asking yourselves? And the reason is because, first off, in spring of that year, there was one of the biggest upsets in the history of League of Legends, which was the spring season of champions, the spring tournament, where MVP Ozone came through. First off, they beat Faker in the semifinals of that season. That was Faker's first season, his first tournament. They beat that SK Telecom T1-2, which we called Judgment Day at the time, because they decided to have the most annoying name ever created. And then they would go on to play CJ Entis Blaze.
Worse when they were KNS the next year, but okay, that was a pretty bad naming scheme in general.
Well, T1-1 and T1-2 were probably on par with SKT T1S and SKT T1K. They really struggled with the names. So Blaze and Frost, the names that Loco Doco gave that team, were great names.
Yeah.
And so we got an all CJ Entis semifinal on the opposite side. CJ Entis Blaze goes into the finals. Now, this was my second finals casting, and CJ Entis Blaze was an enormous favorite in spring. And this was because
like a 13-game win streak or something.
Yeah, Flame was on fire. They had 3-0'd. They beat the other SK Telecom team in quarters, beat their sister team Frost in semis, and they were on this massive win streak. They looked absolutely amazing. It was one of potentially on paper the most like one-sided finals.
People thought, I mean, you wrote the article, but people thought at the time they'd solved League briefly. Like they Big C figured out a style of how you could funnel gold into your two carries, and they had two of the absolute best carries in the solo lanes. And it meant, unironically, they didn't even need to dragon fight. So at the time, they'd actually sort of like taken this crazy leap in the meta, right?
So this is going to sound pretty elementary now, but what they would do is they would freeze and stack minion waves and then create a minion wave push that would, basically cross map for them. So this was pretty revolutionary at the time, and especially the top lane matchup between and Flame. So Flame was just completely shitting on kids, and this was like basically the apex of Flame's career, and was a bum and basically abused Zach in the finals in order to cheese his way to a victory. But a big part of MVP Ozone's win was Dade completely fucking popping off in these finals. And this was the era of Dade. So you might think about Dade later on where he became very good at Yasuo, but this was like the Twisted Fate Zed Ezreal period of Dade in 2013. And he was really, really good at a variety of these champions. Unquestionably one of the best mid laners in the world. He came off this incredible performance against Ambition, who in this particular season was seen as probably the best mid laner in Korea. So this is before Ambition switched to jungle later on and won the world championship on Samsung many years later in 2017. But effectively, Dade was coming in. The point is Dade was coming in with major tailwinds into Worlds. In summer as well, basically MVP Ozone lost to Faker's team. So there's a rematch in the semis of the previous semifinal. This time MVP Ozone loses, and SK Telecom, that's when that final was the Zed versus Zed, Faker versus Ryu Game 5 moment. SK Telecom wins. They go on to win the world championship, right? And a lot of the core of MVP Ozone's roster, particularly the fact that, so they still had Dandy Imp and Mata, which would go on, this core would go on to win in 2014. Dade and Pawn would be swapped between the two Samsung teams, so they switched mid laners. And then Looper obviously came in for once retired after this year as a player, still a coach, as we've discussed. earlier on this show. So MVP Ozone was coming in not necessarily as a massive favorite at Worlds, but certainly in a position where we expect them to do something.
They were one of the favorites. You have to remember back then, everyone
Amongst
thought all the
them,
Korean
yeah.
teams are going to be insane. Yeah, of course.
So, yeah, you look at this, roster and you think, okay, well, they're coming into season 3 Worlds. And the reason why we get this narrative about Samsung Ozone is they get eliminated in the group stage. And even though they're 5-3, they lose a tiebreaker to Gambit. But honestly, the biggest reason they were getting dominated was that Dade was absolutely fucking terrible. And he was still playing many of the champions, which he was good at. But some of his like Gragas plays were just really bad. And who knows why he had such a tough time. But it was a pretty miserable performance by him. And I think that it's fair to say that this is where the expectations versus reality really came into play.
And also, it was the format was different. It was like a really big, like I think it was like a 6-team round robin BO1. So it wasn't even just those normal groups where you just fuck up by like losing the one key game. Like they actually just comprehensively lost, guys. It was actually one of the most underwhelming performances probably ever. Especially because the part I actually think is so perfect about the first ever award that made it the Dade Award, Monte, is if you look at the roster of that Samsung team, like 4 of them are Hall of Fame players, bro. Like the greatest players to ever play League of Legends, and the whole team just collectively shit the bed, and then their star player did nothing. Like it's not like this was a bad roster, and like Dade was really good, and he just had a bad. That everyone except Looper is like a bona fide Hall of Fame player now in history. So actually, even going in hindsight, it still seems crazy. Like when you pull up that Wikipedia or whatever, Monty, you see their group. You're like, they should have that all day long, bro. It's got like fucking Vulcan, and actually, even the Gambit one, guys, was the one with Voidal, not with Edward. Like it wasn't even the real Gambit. Like this is actually so whack that they didn't get out of this group. There was no Chinese team there with them. It was OMG and T1 with the other.
It was
group.
also the era where
this should have been the most obvious one to get out of. Yeah,
2013 and 2014, winning in Korea was legitimately significantly harder than winning the World Championship.
Oh, for sure.
And
yeah,
so under those expectations, to have a back-to-back, first off, a finalist in spring, winning spring, right, into a semifinalist, only losing to Faker in summer, you expect this team to at least, for fuck's sake, make it out of groups. And the tiebreaker was really the straw that broke the camel's back there against Gambit. So that is where the Dade Award comes from. You can go back and look at his terrible, terrible Gragas play. Especially, he got absolutely clapped by Alex Ich in the tiebreaker too. He ended it in probably the worst way possible. But Fnatic and Gambit were in the group, so they did have 2 of the European teams. Both European teams end up getting out. And then Gambit immediately loses to Najin Blacksword, and Fnatic does make it to semifinals. One of their appearances, but they played Cloud9 in the first round. It was a best of 3. So. Also, the real finals of that Worlds were SK Telecom versus Najin Blacksword. Nobody remembers that. It was the semifinal match before SK Telecom went to the finals and just completely destroyed Royal Club, Starhorn Royal Club. So, anyway, so that's the history and the origins of the Dade Award. And then we're going to get into where it was and was not awarded from that point forward. And, honestly, we didn't award it during the years we were not doing Summoning Insights when I stepped away from League for a while. So we can also talk about whether anybody deserved it during those years. My opinion is no, they didn't. But we'll have that conversation because there are going to be some people that you might want to put out there as possibilities.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.